going on here? Yo, what's up guys? Back in the garage. You already saw a thumbnail. This two-seater X3 sits low to the ground. It's a fast machine and it's just an animal. So check it out. Today we're gonna raise the suspension just a little bit because the car is actually really low to the ground. I have it jacked up now, but I'm gonna show some footage here. The car only had about 11 inches of ground clearance in the front and barely 10 inches in the back. So those springs have sagged, but from the factory these cars came really low. So 17 through 19 cars all came with the suspension set really low, and I don't know why they did that. Maybe so the cars wouldn't roll over so easy, but the 20s don't have that issue. So if you have a 17 through 19 car and you haven't done this, you're gonna want to check this out. So today we're gonna do the Fox tune. This is the Fox race tune that Fox, the maker of the shocks, recommends to do, and we're gonna adjust the preload on these springs, get some more preload on these springs so it has a better ride height, and hopefully this car will do a lot better over the rough terrain, over the whoops, because he's been bottoming out, and I'm gonna show you guys what I mean by bottoming out. This poor car has been suffering. I don't know if you can see this on video, but the plate is pretty damn thin. It's pretty damn gone. He's been scraping a lot in the back, and then towards the front you can see where that portion that's just hanging off there. Yeah, skid plates have seen better days, but I mean, that's what happens when you ride the car hard. And if you've seen this guy's videos, ChakaLino from Instagram, I'm gonna leave a link to his profile at the bottom, and leave a link to one of his videos that he made. Dude gets down. So check out this clip. Alright, so check it out. You can see in the video how low the car is. And the car looks lower. It's kind of an illusion because the car is extremely wide. He has spacers on the rear of this car, and he's running about 80 inches wide with the spacers and with these method wheels that give him an offset that I think are 4x4. So at 80 inches wide, front and back, and then the suspension being so low, the center of gravity was extremely low, and he's able to drift without any body roll pretty much, and the car is super stable around all those twists and turns that he was doing in that drift video. But he wants to go and, you know, do some whoops, go on some rough terrain, go on the trails, and that's not gonna cut it. This car's sitting way too low. As you saw on the skid plate, it's just bottoming out everywhere. So we're gonna go ahead and do the Fox tune and the preload suspension settings on this car, and hopefully it's gonna help him out a lot. But since the car's so wide, he probably still will be able to drift this car. So we're gonna try and be in a happy medium, get him around 14.5, 15 inches of ground clearance. So we're gonna do the Fox tune, which means setting the preload on the springs and doing the rebound and high speed and low speed compression. So we're gonna get to that now, and if you haven't done this on your 17 through 19 car, I recommend you do it because you don't want to end up like this guy. So as you can see in the video, he's got about 2 inches of ground clearance from the floor. He's got all his buddies in the car. It's caked in mud. And the thing is just hilarious, but that's because, you know, all the weight you put on the car, and it makes sense to raise the suspension to give you more height. When you put that weight on, it'll settle down, but at least it won't be that close to the ground. So why would you want to start off with 10 inches of ground clearance when you can start off at 15? So that's what we're gonna do today, and hopefully this is gonna help him a lot when it comes to those trail rides. So all right, I've already adjusted the driver's side of the suspension. Now we're gonna do front and back the passenger side. So the first thing you want to do is unlock this ring here, and you do that by hitting it with a hammer, tappy tap tap, right on this section here to get it to come loose. So before I started this, I lubed it with WD-40 so the threads are nice and clean, or nice and lubricated, so the these lock collars can spin freely. So once you got that loose, you want to jack up the suspension as far as you can until the wheels are off the ground, and then we're going to start adjusting the preload. And to adjust the preload, all you got to do is turn the spring with this lock collar at the same time. So let's do that now. When you jack the car up, you're gonna want to get at least 2 inches of ground clearance from the wheel to the floor. And the reason for that is because this guy, because of the shock, is kind of still sprung up a little bit the opposite way. So as you can see there, you can still move it down just a tiny bit. And that comes into play because when you measure the spring, the installed spring length, you're gonna want to measure it with that wheel pushed all the way down. You don't want to just measure it how it sits down. You want to measure it with it at its full droop. All right, so the car's jacked up, this ring is loose. In order to get this ring to turn, all you gotta do is turn the springs. So grab a hold of the springs, and I'm doing this from down here. And you're gonna want to turn them clockwise. At least if you're looking at it from above, it'll be clockwise. And you're gonna want to turn this and turn this until the length of the top of the spring all the way to the bottom of the spring is 23 inches. And that's Fox's recommended suspension setting, and we're gonna do that. Like I said, when you get close to that point, you're gonna want to push this down on this to get an accurate reading. So let's go ahead and spin this. Now we're gonna keep turning this until it's the correct length. I'm gonna leave a link in the description where you can find the settings that Fox recommends for the RS, the DS, and I think for the base model. So you guys can check that out. Now I'm gonna warn you guys, I did this to my car initially last year before I got the shock therapy springs, and it becomes a little bit more prone to body roll, aka rolling over. So if you decide to do this because you decide you want more springivity, if that's a word, and you want to be able to go over the whoops and go over some harder you know, small jumps or whatnot, and you want to have more spring, then I suggest you do this. But remember, once you're done, pretend this is a new car. Learn the car like new, learn the limitations of the car, because you don't want to roll this car over or your car over and, you know, have a bad day and blame me. We wouldn't want that.
What I'm talking about might save your life someday, okay?
Okay, Mr. Mackey, okay.
All right, so that seems to be where I want it. Now I'm gonna show you guys what I do in order to measure this. Now I sit on the wheel in order to get the weight down so the arm is fully stretched down, and I do have a jack down there, by the way. Be very careful. Obviously the car's jacked up and there's a jack stand underneath, but something could always happen. So sit on the car, and then once you sit on the car, put you back up here, you're gonna measure from the top of the spring, which is right here, to the very bottom of the spring. And once you measure all the way to the bottom of the spring down here, it should be about 23 inches. So I'm a little bit too much, so I'm gonna give some back. See here, so I'm gonna go the opposite way in order to raise the spring again, and I'm gonna remeasure, and boom, perfect. So once you do that, you can lock that top ring back on. So we'll lock this one, we'll spin this one down. You can see how much we probably went down 1.5 inches. And usually the rule of thumb is if you move down 1 inch on the shock body here, the threads, you get about 2 inches of ground clearance. Good. Preload is set. Now the next thing you're gonna want to do is set the crossover. So reference that file that I put in the description, or that link, and you can see where to measure the crossover rings. So you're gonna measure from the top of the spring to about the bottom of the bottom crossover ring. So it should be about 2.5 inches, I believe, on these front XRSs. It's gonna be different for the DS and all that. So make sure you check that file. So it's not too hard. If you have those shocks flipped like they are in this car, it's a little bit harder because the reservoir is in the way, but normally you could get them from the side here. Just loosen up the crossover rings, push them up to the correct length, and then that will be that. So once you got it where you want it, 2.5 inches from the bottom of the crossover to the top of the spring, go ahead and lock it in place. So next is going to be adjusting the high speed and low speed compression, as well as a rebound, which is found at the very bottom of the shock. Now this step is fairly easy. Just turn all your settings clockwise into the fully closed position, just like this. And down here too. So once you have all 3 settings closed to the fully clockwise position, you're going to want to open them per the settings for your car. So this is the RS, so we're going to do 3 turns of low speed compression. So half, 1, half, 2, half, 3, and that's it. So now we'll do the high speed compression, and the high speed compression is 4 turns. So let me see here, remember where your ratchet's at, so about there. So just turn it, 1, 2, 3, 4 turns. Then we'll go to our rebound. For the front, it's about 20 clicks. So go down here, and this is not full turn, this is clicks, so it feels a lot different. So 1, 2, 18, 19, 20. All right, so that's it. That's the Fox tune for the front. Now we'll move on to the rear. I'm gonna adjust the low speed, high speed, and rebound for the rear shocks. Same exact process as the front, and the actual settings are exactly the same as far as the suspension, compression, and rebound settings. The only thing that's different from the front to rear is gonna be the spring length and the crossover length. So I'm gonna go ahead and adjust these. Exactly the same. Only difference is it's on these reservoirs and not on the shock body itself. All right, so the car's jacked up in there. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up this crossover ring and the preload ring. All right, so same concept as the front. Only difference is the length of the springs from the very top to the very bottom is going to be 31 inches, and the length from the bottom of the crossover ring to the top of the spring there is going to be 5.5 inches. All right, so I got 31 inches of total installed spring length, and remember, pull down on the wheel, make sure it's not touching the ground. Make sure this shock is completely extended when you measure the length of the springs. So 31 inches in total, that's where Fox wants it to be. And I got also the crossover rings at about 5.5 inches from the top of the spring. So this is good to go. I'm gonna tighten everything up and we're gonna see where the ride height's at. How's it going? Woo. All right, so we gotta go ahead and get the scrub out of it. Damn, this motherfucker's loud. All right, so that should be it. Let's see where our total ride height is at. So right around 14 inches. So not too bad. So the Fox Tune says you should be around 15.5 inches. Now to me, this car already has a few miles on it, and that's a sign that the car springs have sagged. So it's actually a known issue with these Can-Am vehicles. These springs will sag, and there's just nothing you can do about it. They start to sag over time from the beatings they take, and especially when you got a stage 5 like ChakaLinos does. Hitting that stage 5 really puts that into the wheels, you know what I mean? So let's check the front. We're about 14.75. So yeah, that's where I expected it to be, because well, not where I expected it to be exactly, but I expected it to be a little bit higher in the front than it was in the rear, because when he brought it to me, the rear was about 1 inch lower. The front was about 11 inches. The rear was about 10 inches from ground clearance. So, all right, so I'm happy with the car. We gained about 3.5 inches in the front of ground clearance and about 4 inches in the rear. So that's pretty cool. I like the stance of where it's sitting at now, as opposed to when it came in. It was a little too low for my taste. I know he was drifting a lot, so you know it worked perfect out for him. But he wants to hit the whoops now, so we're gonna see. We're gonna see how he likes it. I think it looks even better this way. I mean, ground clearance, baby. I love ground clearance. My car sits about 15 inches in the rear and 15.5 in the front. So this is a little bit off from that. I do have shock therapy springs, and that would be the next step. Get yourself some better springs, some e-box or some shock therapies. But if you don't want to do that for the time being, you want to spend your money somewhere else, like he did. He's got stage 5, and I got nothing over there. I'm stocked when it comes to the engine. You know, spend your money wisely. You know, you could just go ahead and do this Fox Tune, preload the springs, get a little bit more ride height, and I think you'll be happier with the car. So if you want the most life for your springs, best bang for your buck, this is free. Go ahead and adjust your spring preload, adjust the shocks, and go ahead and start using your car again at a better ride height where you can avoid some of these bigger rocks. Car looks great. Stay tuned. Let's do some donuts.